Hello, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm doing a video defining introverted intuition. So introverted intuition is the dominant cognitive function for INFJs and INTJs in the Myers Briggs system, and it's the secondary cognitive function for ENTJs and ENFJs in the Myers Briggs system. So today what we're going to do is I'm going to take quotes from some of the earlier players who defined these things. I'll take quotes from Carl Jung in his 1921 book Psychological Types. Then I'll take quotes from Vanderhoop in his 1937 book Conscious Orientation. Then I'll take quotes from Myers and Briggs in their 1980 book Gifts Differing, and they started working as early as 1942, so that's why that date range is there. So based on their quotes, I kind of paid attention to what words did I see over and over again and what themes did I see over and over again. So we'll kind of go over then what's the consensus, the different authors and people over the years kind of take their own little branches and they go different ways, but I want to see what's the foundation, what's the core principles that we're building off of here. And then I want to get into kind of what's the caricatured vibes. So in America in 2023, if I play up the stereotypes and kind of emphasize the certain qualities, what could it look like? So let's start with Carl Jung. So this quote has kind of some context, and it's about this person that has an attack of vertigo, and it's how it kind of contrasts how a sensor or an intuitive might kind of approach the situation. And I have the intuition section right here. Intuition, on the other hand, receives from the sensation only the impetus to immediate activity. It peers behind the scenes, quickly perceiving the inner image that gave rise to the specific phenomenon, the attack of vertigo in the present case. It sees the image of a tottering man pierced through the heart by an arrow. This image fascinates the intuitive activity. It is arrested by it and seeks to explore every detail of it. It holds fast to the vision, observing with the liveliest interest how the picture changes, unfolds further, and finally fades. So this will definitely start a theme of kind of peering behind as to the why. Why did this happen? Peering behind the scenes. What was the impetus? And there's definitely a theme, if you pay attention as this goes on, with the word vision and the word image. The word vision and image comes up many times, and so it's this inner image that fascinates the introverted intuitive. Just as the extroverted intuitive is continually scenting out new possibilities, which he pursues with an equal unconcern, both for his own welfare and for that of others, pressing on quite heedless of human considerations, tearing down what has only just been established in his everlasting search for change, so the introverted intuitive moves from image to image, chasing after every possibility in the teeming womb of the unconscious, without establishing any connection between the phenomenon and himself. So yeah, this kind of contrasting extroverted intuition from introverted intuition. Extroverted intuition sending out all the possibilities externally and tearing down everything in its path, kind of in a voracious way. Introverted intuition doing the same thing, but internally. And there's kind of this emphasis, there's a lot of dark type words, like the teeming womb of the unconscious. It just seems like this dark, going into this place. In this way, the consciousness of his own bodily existence fades from the introverted intuitive's view, as does its effect upon others. So yeah, this will begin a theme of kind of this, the floating head, as NI is called sometimes, but the bodily existence fades from view. I was thinking about, if you look at your finger, everything else behind it becomes blurry, and you're just focused on this finger. And for the introverted intuitive, kind of metaphorically, the finger are those intuitions, and the bodily existence fades from the view. It's not that it's gone, but it's faded from view, and it's definitely not at the forefront. The archetype would be, to borrow from Kant, the nomenon. So a nomenon is a very specific thing in Kant's whole philosophy. And so I put a brief definition here. Knowledge posited as an object that exists independently of human sense. So examples of that are God or the soul. It's things that you feel like they exist, but they exist independently of you being able to sense them. So this is definitely in the realm of intuitive type things. It's independent of sense. So the archetype would be, to borrow from Kant, the nomenon of the image, which intuition perceives and in perceiving creates. So intuition perceives these things that it didn't get from senses at all, and there will be an emphasis on spiritual things, I know God and soul is the example that I used, and there is a big spiritual emphasis. The word spiritual does come up a lot. So intuition perceiving these things, and then because it perceives it, kind of creates it. And this reminds me a lot of time travel movies, where as soon as and every time in a time travel movie, as soon as someone knows that it exists, it then kind of impacts what actually happens. That's just because, if I think to myself, I want to be a teacher, I'm more likely to be a teacher than if I had never thought that thing. So as soon as you think something, it has the potential and the more likelihood to create that reality. It can even foresee new possibilities in more or less clear outline, as well as the event which later actually transpires. Its prophetic prevision is to be explained from its relation to the archetypes, which represent the law-determined course of all experienceable things. So this is one of the first quotes. We have this, spiritual prophecy, that type of thing will come. You can kind of see where they get this prophetic, NI has kind of this prophetic stereotype, although there will be quotes later on that says it's not always right. Like, just because you see this future thing doesn't mean it's right. But what I like that this quote pointed out is this clear outline. It foresees these new possibilities in a clear outline. The law-determined course of all experienceable things. This word course will come up. It's kind of this correct direction. There will be quotes about a correct or an incorrect direction, or the correct course of things, the clear outline of how things transpire. Intensification of intuition naturally often results in an extraordinary aloofness of the individual from tangible reality. He may even become a complete enigma to his own immediate circle. Yeah, aloofness from the tangible reality. This is again with that finger metaphor that I was telling you about. But just when you're so immersed in the meaning behind things, or the image or the vision, there's a cost to that, and the cost of it is being aloof externally. If not an artist, he is frequently an unappreciated genius, a great man gone wrong, a sort of wise simpleton, a figure for psychological novels. I wanted mostly to include this quote because of the psychological novels, because there's something, I guess I'll talk about it a little bit more later, but there's something very Christopher Nolan, you're talking about the movie Inception, there's something very NI about a lot of those movies, especially time travel, and I'll get into more of it later, but I thought it was interesting. At this time, he wouldn't be talking about psychological movies, but I feel like psychological movies, especially with an element of time hopping, seem very NI to me. The moral problem comes into being when the intuitive tries to relate himself to his vision, when he is no longer satisfied with mere perception and its aesthetic shaping and estimation, but confronts the question, what does this mean for me and for the world? What emerges from this vision in the way of a duty or task, either for me or for the world? He concerns himself with the meaning of his vision. So he talked about if they're purely NI, they might not bring into it any action or any moral obligation for yourself. But when you bring in a judging function, then you might get into, well, what does this vision mean for shaping reality? What's the duty or task? I think that sounds very TE to me, what's the task that's going to fall in line with this vision? But what does it mean for me and for the world? What emerges from this vision, either for me or for the world? And when you include that judging function, there's a little bit more emphasis on the world and what's the meaning. But this is a very good quote. He concerns himself with the meaning of his vision. These are words that come up a lot. The word meaning comes up a lot, and the word vision, again, is coming up a lot. He feels bound to transform his vision into his own life. But since he tends to rely exclusively upon his vision, his moral effort becomes one-sided. He makes himself and his life symbolic, adapted, it is true, to the inner and eternal meaning of events, but unadapted to the actual present-day reality. Therewith, he also deprives himself of any influence upon it, because he remains unintelligible. So lots of things to unpack in this quote. The first sentence, transforming vision into life. It's this correct path. What are the course of things? Yeah, transforming your vision into your life and how you want your life to go. But it talked about that such a heavy NI emphasis. You're adapting your whole life to your vision. Everything in life needs to follow on course with this vision. And so you will completely adapt yourself, whatever the vision wants. That's what we're doing. However, completely unadaptable to present-day reality. And present-day reality might not fall in line with this vision. So it's such a strong emphasis on this vision and feeling like this is the meaning of life, and I am not going to sacrifice the meaning of life. So very unadaptable. I was very surprised to read this, but there will definitely become a theme of unadaptable, because you're so focused on this vision that anything that doesn't fall in line with this vision, we're not adapting to it. And part of that sensory things, other people, but unadapted to present day reality. And then this is the hard part. This is another hard thing with introverted intuition. Deprives himself of any influence upon it, any influence upon reality or the world. And that is one of the hard things with introverted intuition, is when you become so introverted or too into NI, you become unadapted to the world and lacking influence, not having any influence. Unintelligible is another one. I think NI NI on its own is kind of an unintelligible function. So you really rely on FE and TE are not unintelligible, but NI on its own is very unintelligible. So too much NI becomes this person that's not having influence in the world and people don't understand. It's this enigma that they said before, unintelligible. Okay, so let's move on to Vanderhoop. The introverted intuitive perceives connections and meaning in the internal world, and with as much spontaneity and conviction as the extroverted intuitive sees them in the external world. It is not primarily his own personal inner life that he grasps in this way, but rather inner life in general, the inner nature of things. The aim of intuition here is to perceive the ideal essence of all things. So yeah, seeing connections, meaning, again, we're seeing this word meaning again. Meaning in the internal world comes up over and over and over again. Introspective to the nature of things in general. There's kind of a broad internal scope. Hence, there are found also among intuitive introverts great spiritual leaders, prophets, founders of religions, all those people who, for the sake of some sacred inner conviction, will endure the world's misunderstanding and contempt. It would be a mistake, however, in studying a function to consider only its extreme potentialities, for this type assumes also many much less noble forms. So it talks about, on the extreme, like if we're really amping up this characteristics, it definitely on the extreme goes to being a spiritual leader or prophet or religions. They definitely made mention of like prophets in Israel. There were definitely some like Bible references in Carl Jung section as well. But they said there will also assume much less noble forms. But if you're going to amp up these characteristics, going in the spiritual side. In childhood, they may have periods of uncertainty and reserve, after which they suddenly become very determined. And if then they are opposed, they may manifest an astonishing self-will and obstinacy. As a result of the intensely spontaneous activity within, they are frequently moody, occasionally brilliant and original, then again reserved, stubborn, and arrogant. So there's this theme that I think I've never attributed to introverted intuition before, but it comes up over and over again in many of the different author sections of this stubborn, arrogant, reserved. And there's also it's kind of this ebb and flow, not constant. There's an inconstant nature to both of the introverted functions, but in this case it's, kind of reserved and then really determined and, kind of this ebb and flow. And there will become a lot of quotes about this flash of insight, kind of this inspiration will really affect them. So it creates kind of a moody type vibe where, really inspired and then kind of reserved, stubborn, arrogant, and, kind of this ebb and flow. Although they may have only a vague feeling about the way they want to go and of the meaning of their life, they will nevertheless reject with great stubbornness anything that does not fit with this. They fear lest external influences or circumstances would drive them in a wrong direction, and they resist on principle. So there's definitely the course of their life, that whole theme. They may have a vague feeling about the way they want to go, and the meaning of their life. Once again, we have meaning, and meaning of life, and the word purpose will come up. And they, even if it's only vague, if they know in general, these are the bounds that I want to go in, rejecting anything with stubbornness that does not fit in there. So once again, we're having not adapting to anything that does not fit in with the course of their life. And there's this wrong direction. I think there are certain types that don't have this wrong. There's no such thing as a wrong direction. You just make choices and you see where that goes. But I think with NI, there's definitely there is a right direction and there is a wrong direction, and resisting anything on principle. It's kind of like extroverted feeling had this, there are wrong feelings and there are correct feelings, whereas with NI, we're having this wrong direction and right direction. In their immediate environment, they seek to regulate everything according to their own ideas, which is apt to make them tyrants within their own small circle. Rather than adapt themselves, they will limit their contact with those who do not fall in with them. The rest of the world matters, in fact, very little to them. If some individual or some event or some object responds to this sense which they have of the meaning of their life and reveals to them something of their deeper purposes, then they take up a different attitude and become conscious of a more intense, more profound connection in things. So there's so many things to unpack here. I was thinking about different traits that some of these functions have. Like I was thinking tyrant has been mentioned in NI, tyrant has been mentioned in TE, and tyrant has been mentioned in FI. So I'm thinking like if you're an NTJ, you like triple tyrant tendencies. Then I was thinking like if you're an INFJ, if you have NI-TI, you might be like double arrogant because NI and TI both mentioned arrogant tendencies. So I was just thinking, I'm mentioning the NJ patterns, but there's a whole bunch more that I've noticed. But I was just thinking about, some of these functions, how some of their negative traits can be exacerbated when you have multiple functions that are all like having this tendency. I thought this was very interesting. Rather than adapt themselves, they limit their contact with those who do not fall in with them. I've never thought, I've never thought to myself that you could be any other way. I just never thought to myself, why would you change yourself for people when you could just find people that fall in with you? But it's very interesting that it occurred to me in reading the sentence that not everyone is like that. And yeah, so it just talks about, but then if someone comes in and reveals to them more and they're contributing more to that deeper purpose of their life, because that's the whole thing with NI. So when someone does come in and contribute a more conscious view of things, helps you understand a more profound connection in things, then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, yeah, let's bring you into the circle then. Where the inner life finds expression, there will be close attachment, but side by side with this, there will be a cold aloofness. As far as material and instinctual life is concerned, these people feel exceedingly helpless, like people suddenly transplanted from another planet. They feel much more at home in spiritual things. Yeah, there's kind of this push and pull with introverted intuition where, with these people that are contributing deep purpose or where their inner life is finding expression, okay, close attachment, let's bring you in. But, then very close to there's this cold aloofness. So there's a lot of like paradox in here with this like attached and then aloof, or really inspired and brilliant and then reserved and moody. So whenever he uses the word instinctual, he means like sensory. So like as far as material and sensory things are concerned, they feel exceedingly helpless, like people suddenly transplanted from another planet. I do think that is true. But its activity often remains indefinite, owing to an inability to find adequate expression for the tension of what they mean. The spiritual side of life can only be approached through symbols. Moreover, a great deal of confusion arises because it is not understood that this is, in any case, only an approximation. So it's like with communication, they're finding a vibe for things. It's like an approximation. They might try to use a symbol, like a metaphor or a simile or something, but it's still, there's a tension with what they mean. It's hard to adequately express. And so, you use this metaphor to kind of approximate it, or this metaphor to kind of approximate it, but it's not clear and specific like other functions can be. With SI, we saw clear and specific. With TI, we saw clear and specific. NI, it's more like, it's vague. The influence of reason is very variable and egocentric, and knowledge fragmentary. Their thought remains aphoristic. An aphorism is a pithy observation that contains a general truth, such as, the grass is always greener on the other side, and is often expressed in paradoxes, like my weakness is my strength. So you can see this kind of communication style. This is not clear necessarily. With, you can use, other functions, maybe TI or TE can kind of clean it up a little bit, but NI in itself is kind of just this ephemeral. But we do see this egocentric is something that comes up in more ways than one. But kind of this general truth, these observations in general, expressed in a metaphor, for example. They will occasionally propound with equal conviction mistaken and fantastic views, which they maintain with obstinacy in the face of all criticism. Intuitive conviction stands for more than rational argument, which renders such people occasionally extremely conceited and opinionated. They have there have been phrases about prophecy or prevision or whatever. Yeah, but sometimes, they're equally mistaken and, the thing is not right. But very obstinate. I didn't know the word obstinacy was obstinacy. I thought it was obstinacy with an N. Anyways, I learned that this video because this word has come up so much, obstinacy. The number of times I typed this word or read this word was many, many times. Anyways, so very obstinate in the face of criticism, can be occasionally extremely conceited and opinionated. I was very surprised to find this in the NI section. Now, I'd known a lot of NJs, including myself, to be conceited and opinionated. But I never attributed it to NI. I attributed it to other functions. But we're like, oh, well, maybe it is NI. Here we go. Okay, sorry, this looks bad. Where it is a question of feeling with people of this type, emotional contacts are extremely inconstant. These people are at one moment full of enthusiasm and devotion, at the next utterly cold and standoffish. So continuing this, this ebb and flow, there's definitely this theme of kind of like paradoxes, at one moment like this, at one moment like this, and extremely inconstant, very much the ebb and flow of like the tide coming in. Spontaneous insight and the images associated therewith affect the feelings of the introverted intuitive. The image of what the feeling should be may easily be substituted for a feeling relationship. He will then make demands on others without being prepared to meet the same demands on himself. Egotism and a desire to dominate may then make use of these requirements of an ideal relationship for their own ends. So yeah, they talked about this moodiness, and it seems that part of it is just these images, and these images affect the feelings of the introverted intuitive. Basically, this inspiration really affecting the individual. And once again, we have this egotism, a desire to dominate, using other people potentially for the sake of this course and this trajectory that you want to be on. As with extroverted intuition, here also contact is least with the facts of the external world and with instinctual life. Such people live, as it were, alongside their bodies until these, by some disturbance, demand their attention. So yeah, this whole floating head, living alongside your bodies, I thought that was a very interesting thing to point out. They're not really here with the sensory life in the external world. But at some point, sensory comes along and, this disturbance will demand your attention. Okay, so now let's move on to Myers Briggs. Regards the immediate situation as a prison from which escape is urgently necessary and aims to escape through some sweeping change in the subjective understanding of the objective situation. This is so interesting to me. So I talked about with both the intuitive functions, it felt like there was this prison. Now with extroverted intuition, the thing that was going to deliver them and free them from this prison was a sweeping change in the objective situation. So we're going to make a change. We're going to pursue this, we'll pursue this, but externally we're making a change. For introverted intuition, it's a sweeping change in the internal understanding of the situation. So you free yourself from this prison by seeing it from a new perspective. Receives its impetus from outer objects, but is never arrested by external possibilities, being occupied rather by searching out new angles for viewing and understanding life. So once again, these new angles, let's understand life from a new angle that's pure behind the scenes, finds its greatest value lies in the interpretation of life and the promotion of understanding. This interpretation, I find that's probably a key word for introverted intuition, the interpretation of life. Requires the development of balancing judgment, not only for the criticism and evaluation of intuitive understanding, but to enable it to impart its visions to others and bring them to practical usefulness in the world. Yeah, this part of, NI on its own kind of lacking influence or usefulness in the world, but you combine it with FE or TE, and that will bring usefulness and actually be able to impart its visions to the world. Otherwise, you're looking at someone who's kind of lacking influence, not really influential. Are driven by their inner vision of possibilities. Once again, this inner vision comes up over and over again. Are determined to the point of stubbornness. So we have, this is the vision of how things are going. This is the course, and we are so determined and we are stubborn to anything. I value the course above all, probably even above people, and so very stubborn and not adaptable. Are stimulated by difficulties and most ingenious in solving them. So once again, we have being stimulated by difficulties. Both of the intuitive functions, kind of liking problems and problem solving. Are motivated by inspiration, which they value above everything else, and use confidently for their best achievements in any field they choose. Science, engineering, invention, political or industrial, empire building, social reform, teaching, writing, psychology, philosophy, and religion. Are deeply discontented in a routine job that offers no scope for inspiration. Their greatest gifts come directly from their intuition, the flashes of inspiration, the insight into relationships of ideas and meaning of symbols, the imagination, the originality, the access to resources of the unconscious, the ingenuity, and the visions of what could be. Without a developed auxiliary judging process, they will have little or no development of an outer personality and equally limited use of the gifts. However, a good judging process and support will shape the intuitive perceptions into conclusions or actions that will have a sound impact on the outer world. So there are so many things in here, these flashes of inspiration. A lot of the themes that we've been seeing are seen in this quote, these flashes of inspiration, the word insight, the relationships of ideas, the meaning of symbols. These are so many, visions of what could be. That is probably the most common word. But they talk about, again, lacking external impact, lacking sound impact on the outer world without an auxiliary judging process. And Myers and Briggs, with all of the functions, they have said this. They have, in every single section, they say you need to have an auxiliary judging process with the extroverted functions, with the introverted functions. And the reason is that you need to go inside, get the depth and get the wisdom, and then, you provide impact on the world. You don't want impact on the world without kind of the sound judgment, and you don't want just the sound judgment holed up in a cave, without being able to tell anyone. Okay, so now let's get into the themes. Okay, the number one word for introverted intuition was vision. So just to recap, we have all 8 words now. For introverted intuition, the number one word is vision. For extroverted intuition, the number one word was possibilities, usually in the plural form. For introverted sensing, that was the only one that didn't really have a strong word, but archaic, I would say, was the word that I saw most often, meaning old-fashioned, doesn't necessarily have a negative connotation. Extroverted sensing, I would say the number one word I saw was sensation. I don't know if it counts, but they even used forms of the word like sensational, or maybe react, could be the word reactive. For extroverted thinking, the word was systems. For introverted thinking, the word was principles. For introverted feeling, the word was probably moral, or moral law or code, could be misunderstood. And for extroverted feeling, the word was harmony. So these I might use these words going forward, just these are words I saw over and over again. So for introverted intuition, the word was vision, or synonyms of the word vision. It could have been image, for example, or a pre-vision, or a prophetic image, or words like that. Inner image sees the image, holds fast to the vision, moves from image to image, meaning of his vision, transform his vision into his own life, rely exclusively upon his vision, insight and the images associated. The image substitutes the relationship, impart its visions, are driven by their inner vision of the possibilities, flashes of inspiration, visions of what could be. It can even foresee new possibilities in more or less a clear outline, as well as the event which later actually transpires. Prophetic prevision, spiritual prophet. So yeah, many times reading the word vision. Okay, deeper meaning. Now there's I almost could have split this into two slides. Deeper as in there are things going deep and dark, or peering behind the scenes, or kind of this deeper, darker than what's behind the surface. And then meaning, just the word meaning. The word meaning was also a very, very commonly used word, the word meaning. So this kind of encapsulates both those things. And a lot of these quotes encapsulated both of those things. That's why I did ultimately decide to keep it on one slide, even though there's a lot of stuff here. Peers behind the scenes. Chasing after every possibility in the teeming womb of the unconscious. What does this mean for me and for the world? He concerns himself with the meaning of his vision, the inner and eternal meaning of events, perceives connections and meaning in the internal world, inner nature of things, the meaning of their life, deeper purposes, profound connection in things, spontaneous insight, subjective understanding of the objective situation, searching out new angles for viewing and understanding life, interpretation of life and the promotion of understanding, the insight into relationships of ideas and meaning of symbols, access to resources of the unconscious. Okay, then we have this life path. Words like path or course or the direction, words like that came up a lot. The image which intuition perceives and in perceiving creates, course, feels bound to transform his vision into his own life, vague feeling about the way they want to go, drive them in the wrong direction, which kind of brings up the assumption that there is a correct direction, visions of what could be. It can even foresee new possibilities in more or less clear outline. Detached. Without establishing any connection between the phenomenon and himself, consciousness of his own bodily existence fades from the introverted intuitive's view. Knowledge posited as an object that exists independently of human sense. Aloofness of the individual from tangible reality. He makes himself and his life symbolic. Unadapted to the actual present-day reality. Not primarily his own personal inner life that he grasps in this way, but rather inner life in general. Cold aloofness. Symbols. I put psychological novels, there's going to be a lot of symbolism in there. Remains indefinite. Inability to find adequate expression for the tension of what they mean. Can only be approached through symbols. It is only an approximation. Aphoristic. Paradoxes. Meaning of symbols. And I think a lot of times even the images they talked about so many times were kind of a symbol for the thing. Inconstant. Extremely inconstant. At one moment full of enthusiasm and devotion. At the next utterly cold and standoffish. Insight and images affect the feelings. Motivated by inspiration. Flashes of inspiration. So yeah, just talking about how the inspiration will kind of give them an inconstant flavor. A disconnect, and this is particularly about a bodily disconnect, not feeling very connected to the sensory world in your own body. Consciousness of his own bodily existence fades from the introverted intuitive's view. As far as material and instinctual life is concerned, these people feel exceedingly helpless, like people suddenly transplanted from another planet. Live alongside their bodies until some disturbance demands their attention. Regards the immediate situation as a prison from which escape is urgently necessary. Deeply discontented in a routine job. Okay, these are getting to probably the two last more negative ones every time we get into the more negative ones. This one I would say is inflexible, not adaptable to other people or anything that doesn't fall in with your vision. If opposed, they may manifest an astonishing self-will and obstinacy, frequently moody, reserved, stubborn, and arrogant, reject with great stubbornness anything that does not fit with this, resist on principle, regulate everything according to their own ideas, tyrants within their own small circle, Rather than adapt themselves, they will limit their contact with those who do not fall in with them. The rest of the world matters, in fact, very little to them. Influence of reason is egocentric, mistaken and fantastic views, obstinacy in the face of all criticism, extremely conceited and opinionated, make demands on others without being prepared to meet the same demands on himself, egotism, are determined to the point of stubbornness. So there's a lot in there. Obscure. This is one that I didn't know exactly how to call it, but basically there's a tendency to kind of just be away in your cave and have no impact, pretty much. Remains unintelligible, deprives himself of any influence, inability to find adequate expression for the tension of what they mean, requires the development of balancing judgment to enable it to impart its visions to others and bring them to practical usefulness in the world. Little or no development of an outer personality, and equally limited use of the gifts. Okay, so now I wanted to get into one slide with words that I saw over and over and over again. So I went back through and I took words that were directly in the text, most of these words used many times, or I found what would be synonyms. If it was a word used many times, I found a synonym for it or a phrase that they used. So yeah, I'll remove my face in a second, but you can screenshot this if you want. I've been making a slide for all these. Now we've got the whole 8 slides. So if you want to show a beginner, or you want to just you want just like one key reference point just as a refresher or whatever for what all these quotes were. Okay, so starting in the top left, we have vision, meaning, insight, inspiration, deeper, purpose, profound, understanding, symbolic, internal connections, direction, course, like as in like the course of your life, vague, aloof, detached, cold, prophecy, pithy observation, future, general truth, approximating, generalities, indefinite, live alongside bodies, inconstant, ebb and flow, obstinacy, arrogant, metaphor, sensory deprivation, floating head. So yeah, this is one that I feel like encapsulates introverted intuition pretty well. I chose this picture because there were so many quotes, especially in Carl Jung's work, and I left out a lot of them, but there were many quotes about being a spiritual leader or a prophet. And I felt like this picture kind of encapsulates someone that looks like they could be a spiritual leader, perhaps meditating, going in, inwardly searching out all the possibilities, just very still, not necessarily super attached to their body, just sitting very still, eyes closed to even show that they're not focused on the external world, but going inwardly and determining kind of what the course of things should be, maybe looking at a prophecy, maybe they're praying. There was a lot of spiritual emphasis there. Okay, so I wanted to get into one slide that is an introverted intuition caricature. This is if I take the stereotypes and I really just like play them up and really play up these characteristics, what would it look like? So one thing I want to point out just immediately is look how dark this looks. There were so many quotes about getting into the teeming womb of the unconscious and things like that, and there is like almost a dark, like it looks very dark, as well as things look kind of spacey, and I didn't really try to do that, but it did say that they feel like they've been kind of like transplanted from another planet. So it's kind of dark and it's kind of spacey, very symbolic. I didn't try to go for that vibe, but now in looking at it, that is like what it looks like. So in the top left, we have kind of this like laptop and things like that. What I wanted to point out was kind of minimalism, not necessarily like the organized nature of that thing, but it's very minimal. See how it's like one color palette? Like when I think of, like, some people really don't like how grayish has taken over, just like black and white home decorating, but it's very, to me, in my opinion, it's very clean, very minimal. I think minimalism in general is something that I associate with introverted intuition. There's enough SE to kind of like the way things look. Like, I think Apple computers look very attractive, but not enough sensory to want that. We don't want not like a ton of sensory things, not looking for tons of possibilities or, so a little interested in sensory things, but I find minimalism in general is what I wanted to point out. I would say minimalism is something that I see a lot. Right below that, there's someone working on a computer, and what I wanted to point out was that it was a dark room. I just find that there's something about, when you're working alongside your body, very detached from your body, it's almost like when you think of extroverted sensing, like extroverted sensing first, it said that they want a height of the sensory experience, like the highest pitch, intense sensory experiences. Anyways, I find like a dark room, maybe because they're not aware of their body, living alongside their body, they're not aware that the room has gotten dark, or maybe just because they like that. But I find that like working in a dark room is something that I see. Then we have the giver, and I wanted to, maybe not the giver in particular, but I wanted it to represent in general these type of books that have metaphors that go throughout them, or really liking to look into the symbols or metaphors within books. How that movie goes from black and white to in color. It's not personally one of my very favorite examples of this, but I think it's kind of a well-known example, so I included it. And it has a lot of symbolism within it. Kind of, when you go into like the old man's, what was he called, the seer or whatever, and you go in your training, and I think that whole thing kind of seems very NI. Then I have the top from the movie Inception, and it's just kind of this metaphor of time and if things are real, and it's a symbol for it. And there was a lot of talk about symbols, and I think that that's a very good symbol to point out within that movie. There's something very NI within a lot of Christopher Nolan movies in general, especially because they play with time and how seeing it then affects it. This dream within a dream, going kind of deep into the realm of the unconscious. There's something very NI seeming about a lot of his movies, and I'm thinking of Inception in particular. In the top right, I have a few different things. I have astrology, I have shamanic healing, I have mysticism, and I have life path numbers. And there's something about all of these things that seem very NI. There was definitely a lot about, there were a lot of quotes about being spiritual and kind of seeing the future, and a lot of these all have to do with that. Like when you think of astrology and you get your whole chart, and it's even from space, transplanted from another planet, and kind of spiritually, like you can't prove it in a sensory way, but kind of this providing the trajectory from your life and the meaning and purpose, kind of like that you were born with this meaning and with this purpose and with this path. And I think NI kind of likes that idea that you were born with this correct path. Same with like life path numbers, getting into that whole thing. And this year it's year 7, and this year it's year 8, and getting into that whole path of things. In the bottom left, I just have 2 people just kind of staring, and I just wanted to show like it's this very still staring out of something, but not really looking at the thing. It's not really looking at the ocean necessarily. It's just staring and thinking. It's like the finger thing I said again. Okay, the ocean's out here. You're not really looking at it. You're looking at the intuition, which is kind of holding your attention, and everything is fading out into the background. Or sitting in a car and staring out the window, but not actually staring out the window. It's just providing some place for your head to be, really. And then you go in and you're thinking, and you're following this path of these intuitions, but not really staring out. It's not really looking at anything. It's all faded out into the background. It's just providing a place for your head to be while you think about these intuitions. Then we have the Beauty and the Beast rose. What I wanted to point out about this, the color palette of this is very interesting, but what I wanted to point out mostly was how it was a symbol for the time passing. So it's more similar, it's kind of like the top from Inception, or just the symbolism of this rose, that it's falling, and being interested in the symbolism of things. Then we have the yin and yang symbol, or yin and yang, I think you pronounce it properly. And it's just this idea of paradox. It's this symbol and this pattern of archetypes of this like masculine and feminine energy represented in a paradox, and it comes together to make this whole, and it's a very holistic symbol of things. There's something very NI about the whole symbolism of this thing. Then in the bottom right, I just have a bunch of outfits. So the thing with Introverted Intuition is that it's an introverted function, and so it becomes very difficult to show externally what an introverted function is doing. What I'm showing is less so Introverted Intuition in these bottom right pictures, and what I'm more so showing is what SE fourth or SE third could look like. So I wanted to show, I don't know what you call this type of style, but I think it's a very distinct type of style. What I wanted to call it was reserved, edgy. It's kind of minimal. It's usually a cohesive, an outfit in general. It's seen from afar. Like you don't look up close at one piece of clothing, but you stand back and it's how does it all work together as a cohesive piece. So I don't know what to call it. I really don't know what to call it. Anyways, in the bottom left, so we have this guy, so it's looking kind of modern. There's a coldness. They talked about being cold or aloof, and these 2 pictures in the bottom left look cold or aloof. But these guys in the bottom they look not adaptable to me. And that's something, they look aloof, they look kind of cold, they look not adaptable. And there's a distance. They look kind of detached, they look kind of distant. There's a cohesion to the outfits. There's a little SE there. Like you'll have some like branding, like SE Dom, like there'd be a lot of like branding in your face. And this doesn't have in your face branding, but you kind of have this subtle name brands, you know what I'm saying? So then we got like Julia Stiles and Zendaya. I'm not making a comment about necessarily what their personalities are. I think Zendaya could be like an INFJ or an ENFJ, one of the two. The outfits that she wears, you know, it's hard to say because they have stylists and things like that. So I lean a little more ENFJ. This looks to me a little SE third more than SE fourth to me. We got Julia Stiles. I'm not necessarily making a comment on it, but it's just this, it's a little edgy. Like her outfit is kind of reserved. Like it's black and white for the most part, Julia Stiles' outfit, but there's a little edge. I mean, you got the pointed toes and the blazer. It's like a little edge, but reserved. Like the overall vibe is reserved. It's like edgy reserved, and I don't know how else to call that. Zendaya, you've got this is looking kind of SE. You know, I associate these razorback tops like that, crop top, that's looking kind of SE to me. But it's all one color, so we're starting to, it's a little leaning a little bit more NI to me. It's black, it's reserved, it's receding from the background. There's a little SE boldness, but a little receding from the background with it being all black. On the far right, we got this girl, you know, she's wearing this black turtleneck. She's got this vampy lipstick. I do find that usually NI users are into makeup, but into makeup in kind of a minimal way. I wanted to point out like Zendaya's makeup below. It's like Kim Kardashian, I don't necessarily think that she's an NJ, but the look of Kim Kardashian's makeup is very NI makeup to me. I find, you know, they've got SE, so kind of into the makeup, but a little bit still on the reserved side. Sometimes, you know, she's got this vampy lipstick on, this dark lipstick. I see that sometimes. It's a little edgy. It's, you know, these people, they look like they're in the dark teams of the unconsciousness, as it will. And they look a little bit in the future. They're a little futuristic, but also a little in the dark teams of the unconsciousness. I would say in general, not usually that many patterns. In general, solids. Definitely in general solids, I would say, if I'm really caricaturing. In general, one color or ombre of one color, perhaps. An all white, all black, or neutrals. Like a lot of neutrals, I would say. So it'll like play with the trends, like, but in kind of a minimal way. Like maybe big blazers are in. So, you know, you've got Julia Stiles wear the blazer, but kind of like still kind of classic, like the classic version of the trend. You got Zendaya, these kind of like baggy pants are in, or docs are in, but wearing it in kind of, it is trendy, I would say, but the minimal, more reserved version of the trendy, you know, you make it all black or whatever. SE might choose bold color, a strong red, a strong blue. I think NI will choose this, there's a subtle boldness, but it's subtle, so it's more so black, full-on black. But certainly any type can do anything, and it depends on what your motivations are. This is me just kind of, you know, playing up the stereotypes or whatever. I have a playlist for each of the personality types linked in the description, so if you're like an INFJ or an INTJ and you want to know all the videos that I've made that could apply to your personality type, you can check those out in the playlist link below. Yeah, let me know what series you want to see next. I thought about doing like the functions versus each other, like TE versus TI, TI versus FI. I thought about going through the different personality types and talking about like what traits they might be double, like the NTJs are kind of like triple tyrant, or the NTJs are kind of like double moody with NIFI. I thought about going through those. So yeah, let me know what you're interested in seeing. I will see you guys in the next one.